Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Content Warfare TV. Today, we are joined by Paul Jarvis, a web designer, best-selling author, and gentleman of adventure. And I just gave him the cue that he is now going to have to explain to us exactly what that means, but I love it as a title.
Thanks. Yeah, that's actually a title that Chris Brogan gave me from my Instagram because I'm usually out in the woods somewhere with my retro-looking hipster Fuji camera. I just took a picture of myself before I was going out with all my gear, and he's like, "Dude, you look like a gentleman of adventure." I'm like, "I'm stealing that."
Yes.
So I think I owe him a quarter every time it's used. So I owe him at least 50 cents already in this call. So.
Well, we like Chris, so we'll make sure that we build it in a couple more times. Maybe we'll get him a couple bucks today.
Exactly, and it'll be in Canadian anyway, so I'm gonna have to do all this conversion. It's just
well, today, I mean, geez, now he's making even more money. I think the Canadian dollars.
Yeah.
Today. So, it's funny talking about Chris Brogan. I had him on the show a long time ago. He has like a knack for that kind of thing, right? And obviously this is about you, but we'll get into that later. He just has a knack for that kind of. You are not the first person who's come on and said that Chris Brogan has given them something in their tagline or their bio. It's just funny how that works with people. But Paul, the reason that I had you on today, I have been voyeuring your work for quite a while now as a newsletter subscriber. Obviously, I enjoy your site, the format, the way that you talk. We were talking a little bit in the green room about just one of the things that we're going to focus this show on, so everyone that's watching gets a good feel for why I had you on in particular, because I think it's important, is you focus your work, or a lot of your work is around, and I'm doing a terrible job with the blue box, but you focus a lot of your work on the human side of this creativity thing, right? Like creativity as a business, and really the kind of emotional and human interactions, obstacles that we have to deal with in order to getting that out and being successful. So I want to start kind of, because you have a new book out, because you've written a lot of different books. We're going to get into your history a little bit, but we're going to do that through the course of the show.
Sure.
I want to talk a little bit about your particular writing process, because you write a lot. I mean, you produce a lot of content, but I want to phrase this. I want this to be really two questions. The first is kind of, what is your process for getting your work out into the world? And secondly, it always seems to build on itself. There is some congruency to it. So talk a little bit about that too, because I think a lot of people, especially people who are watching this, just because I know a lot of them, are shoot from the hippers, right? Like, I have an idea, I shoot from the hip. Tomorrow's article might be something completely different. So can you talk a little bit about that for us?
Sure. So it's kind of broken up into two steps, right? So there's the figuring it out, writing, and all of that, and then there's the putting it out there. So the first part, I kind of break it into, I guess, three areas. So the first part is research. And research a lot of the times is either just reading books or blogs or listening to podcasts. And I kind of see what's out there, what people are talking about. If I have an opinion on it, then I'll write it down in kind of like my scratch pad, which is just like a file that has all the ideas for my articles. Sometimes 90% of them I don't use those ideas and make them into articles. But if I'm stuck, like, what am I going to write about? Then I just look at that, and there's 100 ideas there, and I'll pick one. So I kind of get an idea first. I let it kind of brew a bit in my head, and then I do a bit of research. So if it's something from a book, then I'll see if there's conflicting or counterpoint to that argument, and see, well, maybe I associate more with this thing or this thing. So I kind of try to get a full picture of what it is that I want to write about. And then I just start writing. Like, I sit my ass down and I start typing, and I focus on getting a first draft that is all the ideas I have versus something that reads well. I told somebody else in an interview, my first drafts are basically word vomit. So I just throw up until there's nothing left, and all my ideas for the topic are out. And then I go back and I iterate and make it better slowly. So the second draft will be tiny increments. So the second draft will be a little bit better, third draft will be a little bit better. And by the time it's kind of polished up, then I give it to my editing team, and they go through and make it sound like I know how to write in the English language, which most of the time I don't. So they go through and copy edit it and edit it and call me on anything that doesn't make sense. And then that's kind of the writing process. And for books, it's pretty much the same, except longer. So I'll do, like, every chapter is almost like an article. So I'll just go through and I'll write it. It'll suck. I'll write it again, and it'll be a bit better. I'll write it again, it'll be a bit better, and so on. And then the way that I kind of get the writing out there is I focus entirely on my mailing list. So the mailing list gets all of my articles first, unless I'm writing for another publication. But the stuff that's for me, it goes to my email list first, and it goes out. And I guess I send 52 a year because I send them every Sunday at 6 a.m. So every Sunday I have a new article that goes out 6 a.m. People get to read it, and then I guess whenever I feel like it, after that, I put it on my website or on Medium, or I sell it or syndicate it to somebody else. But it all starts on my mailing list, and that's really what I like. And it feels kind of counterintuitive because it's like mailing lists are kind of a closed system, right? Like you're not sharing it with new people, a lot of people think. But I mean, my mailing list gets shared more than my articles. Like if I look at the, because I use MailChimp, so it generates an EAP URL. So if I look at the shares of people sharing the archive page for the mailing list, it's way more than people share the same article on the blog if I release them both at the same time. So I like my mailing list. I like writing for them. I like interacting with them. My mailing list is very two-way, so I usually get hundreds of replies every email, and I love to sit down and go through all the replies. So that's kind of the process. Like that's the behind the scenes, and then the out and promoted side of things.
Yeah, so that's awesome. There's a lot to dig into there. So the first part is I want to get right back to like the very first thing that you said, and that's the idea of doing research, because here's another place where I think this is these words aren't the best representation, but this is like an amateur versus pro kind of concept to me, and that a lot of times people who are just starting out or who aren't necessarily taking themselves as seriously as maybe they should be don't do research. They aren't going back and trying to find articles. I mean, is that something that you found in your own work? Like to me, when I look at, say, like a Greg Ciotti, right, you can tell that this guy, or a Tommy Walker, like these guys spend hours researching before they ever start to put them into actual articles. Is that really, like, to ascend to another level of not maybe accolades, but just in your own work and doing a higher level of work, is putting in this research time, is that something that people have to really bake into the process?
Yes and no, because sometimes it's not big. Like sometimes, because I've been working for myself for 15, 16 years, some of the things that I write about, I've been doing it for 15 years, I want to share it. So sometimes not, but then sometimes as well, if it's something that, okay, I want to share this, I've been doing it forever, I want to see what other people are doing as well, because I would like, and I kind of shot myself in the foot with the book title, but writing everything I know, the book, kind of that does have some stories for other people in it, but a lot of it is things that I learned. So after I wrote that, I'm like, okay, I kind of got all of that out, so I need to do more research, and that was kind of the catalyst that propelled me to research. The other reason that I do research is inspiration. Like if I can find somebody else writing about something similar, or read a book on a topic that's like a 600-page book on a topic, and I get one or two things out of it. And I do lots of highlighting because I read most of the stuff on Kindle, and I just highlight, and then I go back through the highlights, and it's like, these are all the things that I'm interested in, and now I have basically a scratch pad of ideas that I can take and write from. So I think research also helps being able to write as much as I do. Like I write at least one article a week for my mailing list. I write articles for other publications. I write books. I write course content. So I spend a lot of my time writing, and I don't think there's not enough in my brain to be able to come up with that many ideas. So the research element is such an integral part of just being able to share as much information and as much of a like point counterpoint, as well as just giving myself fodder for learning. And a lot of what I write about too, and a lot like Tommy and Greg kind of approach it, like they have more of a cognitive psychology background, which is awesome, and that's why they're two of my favorite writers. Yeah. But for me, a lot of the stuff I write about are things that I'm interested in, and obviously they're things that I think my audience will value, but I'm writing about them from a place of learning as opposed from like a place of like, I know all this. Like sometimes I do write about that, but some of the stuff I write about is because I want to learn about it. I think other people want to learn about it too. So I'm kind of writing about the process of getting this information, and that involves research.
Yeah. What other places do you get inspiration from? Because you use that word a couple times. I love the idea of getting it from research, because I do too. But I'm interested because I get inspiration for idea, like, you know, there's all these ideas in your head, right?
Yeah.
And I have this thing where when I'm struggling to maybe focus them in a way, I will listen to certain genres of music, like in the car. Like I'll just go for a drive and I'll just play music.
Yeah.
And something in the lyrics, and I found this to be the case enough times that it's actually become part of my process when I'm feeling a little stuck. Something in the lyrics will like click over, and it's like, bam, okay, now I have the focus of that article. Now like it all comes together. Like, how do you? I just find this interesting for people who are creative. Like, what are some of the other places that you get inspiration from, or how do you do it personally, even if it's not like 100% applicable to other people?
Yeah, so I'm fairly similar. Like if I'm stuck on something, then I leave. Like I walk away because I find that it seems counterintuitive to, if you're stuck on something and you need to get it done, to just walk away from it. It seems really counterintuitive, but I found that generally, especially with creative work, dude, like it's this, as soon as you walk away, your brain kind of opens up a bit. And so for me, like I just got back from a 2-hour walk, and I like to do that in the morning. I like to get up early. Sometimes I drive my wife to school, and then I'll just go for a walk. I live somewhere really nice on the ocean, so I'll just go for a walk on the ocean for a couple hours, and then I'll get ideas. And if something is really stuck in there, then I'll just write it down on my phone, put my phone away, kind of thing. But I don't know. It's a good way to, I guess, open your, especially when you're in that like brainstorming process. The more you can kind of open your mind up to letting new ideas in, the easier it is. So getting off of the computer, getting off of sitting in your office and just focusing on, I've got to work because I got to get this done. If you take a break, even if it's 5 minutes, like I just get up and stretch sometimes, and that's enough to get ideas. Showering, that's when I was talking to my friend Jason, Surfer App, and he gets up and has a shower first thing because that's where he gets all his ideas. So he gets up in the morning fresh and has a shower, even if he showered the night before, and that, like, all his ideas come. I need to buy him one of those like waterproof pads and pens so he can have something there.
I actually almost got one of those because I do the same thing. I'm a morning shower person. I don't do it for creativity. I just like to be clean in the morning. And all of a sudden you'll be like, oh crap, and I've like yelled to my wife out of the shower before, like, go get my cell phone, like I need to text myself something, and you know, she thinks I'm freaking crazy. But it's funny, when they come to you, you have to have a way to capture them. So are you capturing them just in like these ideas, Google Note, texting yourself? Like I have a text message to my email address on speed dial, and I just click, like if I hold the one button on my phone, boop, my text message pops up, and I email myself, and that's how I keep all my notes. Like, what's your process for that?
Audio. I use the voice memo app on my phone.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I know some other people that do that too. That's good.
It's easier because I've fat thumbs. I can't type as fast as I can just talk into my phone. So I'll be, I guess they probably think I'm on the phone because I'll just like get an idea while I'm out walking, and I'll be like talking to myself really, really quickly into my phone. And I guess people probably they might think I'm insane anyways, but they probably think I'm just on the phone to somebody.
Yeah. The second episode of this show, so this is 88, I guess, episode 88. The second episode was actually created. I was driving and I had a thought for the show, and I just started talking about that thought, and it turned into a 33-minute episode for the show that I just like pulled it out, because you just start your brain moving, right? And then once, like, it would almost be a travesty once your brain starts moving to not allow yourself to finish that thought. So I just talked for 33 minutes. It's probably awful. I mean, it was 86 episodes ago. But all right, so you talk a lot about the ideas of storytelling, right? And I think this is a good transition because we're talking about researching our work, ideas versus, you know, getting ideas on the paper versus having them be polished. At what point do you start to take your research and massage it into like a story, into some sort of narrative? You know, whether it's kind of a research driven or it's just you kind of explaining something that happened. Like, when does that start to take shape in your writing process? Is it right away, or is it after you get the initial thoughts onto the paper?
Yeah, it's typically after, and if I get an idea for an article, like I said, I kind of like to let it sit for a little bit, because I find if I get an idea and I try to write an article about it, I'll miss 90% of what I actually wanted to say, and then I'll end up reading it once it's live and be like, oh, I should have made all these points. So if I come up with an idea, I write it down, and then I just leave it. And I'll look at it a few times, and that's about it for a few days. And then when I come back to it, I'll have more ideas about it. And that's typically where the stories happen, is if I've given myself a few days to think about it, then I start to think about, okay, well, why does this resonate with me? Like, why does this piece of research or this opinion or this piece of data, why do I feel compelled to share this with people? Why do I think people are going to value it? Why do I value it? And then if I think about that long enough, usually it's because of this specific thing. And then it just makes the writing easier because then I can keep relating it to, like the last article I wrote, I was hungry. And that's why it's talking about like marketing is the icing and your product is the cake. I was hungry. And I was like, well, that's a good analogy, but it kind of works. And then another one was the rat people one. And I was thinking about like how a lot of people that are my audience like the work that I do. A lot of people that aren't hate me and send me death threats and shit like that. So I was like, well, why do I feel compelled to write about this? And I started thinking about my pets, and a lot of people are very polarized with rats, and they either really love rats and there's message boards for rats, or they're like, ooh, rats kill them. So I'm like, it's kind of similar. And when I was writing it, I'm like, this needs to be a story about my rats, even though it's a bigger story about audiences and tribe building and that sort of thing. But I'm like, this is really about my rats, and why I like this topic is because of my rats. So why not share it? And then it becomes more compelling because I'm really compelled to tell the story, and then people like it. And people still, somebody emailed my my book editor, Sherry Hansen, and she was like, the woman that called her was like, I think you're my rat people. I'm glad Sherry had read that article, because she doesn't copy edit my articles. She just copy edits my book and edits my books. So she's like, she understood what that woman was talking about, but it became part of like a colloquialism of my audience to use. And I was like, that's really cool. And that comes from stories.
Yeah.
So it's just really interesting. And I spent a lot of time where I used to live up island. There's more natives, like indigenous people, than white people, basically. And their culture is all storytelling. Like, that's how they pass knowledge on for millennia. And hanging out with them and talking to some of the, like one of my friends is a painter, and he's like world-renowned native painter. He's a brilliant guy, Roy Henry Vickers. And he does, a couple times a year, in his gallery, which is probably the most beautiful building in Tofino, it's all like massive cedar beams. Like the whole thing is just a big cedar room, and he doesn't use a microphone or anything. There's just a like pit in the middle of the gallery where people kind of sit around it, and then he stands at the front. And he doesn't even talk about his art. He just tells stories. He tells his traditional stories, and people come from everywhere to see this guy tell stories. And my wife and I have seen him tell the same story 5 or 6 times. We're friends with him. Like we like to support him into the stories. The same story 5 or 6 times, and it's like, I like those stories more the more I hear them. And every time a lot of them are traditional stories, so they're passed on generationally, but every time he tells the story, he relates it to himself, and he relates it to his own life. And it's like, that's key, and that's what's compelling about that story, is that he's relating it to himself. And I mean, I like to do that as well, because then it just feels more compelling. And the reason why I'm telling it is to make this point, but the why of the reason is because I feel a certain way because of this specific thing in my life.
Yeah. So I'm having fun interviewing you. You're giving me tons of great content here. I have so many ideas written down. So let's. I want to pull something out towards the end of what you said there. And you're talking about your friend Roy, and you've heard him tell the same story over and over again. And then you also said that as you heard him tell it over and over, you almost enjoy it more the more that you've heard it. Something that I get, this is my own demons that I have to fight, and I know a lot of people fight these as well, is the idea that when you tell a story once, then you can never tell that story or pieces of that story again. So so first I just want to get your opinion on and your advice for, if you have a great story, can you continue to weave that back into your content over and over again, different pieces of it? Maybe you don't tell the whole story, maybe you just tell the whole story once and then refer to it. Like, how do we repurpose that story? Because a lot of times we don't have a million stories, right? Like I might have 3 really good stories, but they define me as a person, and they impact everything I write. So how do I continue to use them without maybe burning my audience out on them?
Yeah, so I think, and that's common, right? Like I feel that too, and I think a lot of people feel that. And I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that if you think of it from an audience perspective, they might have only heard, like if they read an article where you told a story, they're going to read it, they might enjoy it, and then they might share it, hopefully. But then it might not be in their mind as much as something that's in your mind because it happened to you and it's your story. So I found that, and a lot of what my books are pulled from articles that I've written, and I always have that fear, like, okay, well, people are reading my articles for free, but then why are they going to buy the books? Right? But then when I look at it, it's like, well, I put so much work into the books to make it flow and to relate it to a broader message that's encapsulated in a book that took way longer to write than a story. And nobody's ever complained about that. It's a fear that I have, similar to you. But nobody's ever complained about that. They just see, if they see things in a different context, then they feel like they can relate to it. Like, oh, I know that story. Now this relates to this. Or now I see that story in a broader picture with a bigger message, sort of thing. So I think, or they just forget. Like I could tell the same story a few times, and people, because it's not their story, or they might have only read it once, they might not remember it. Like obviously I'm going to remember it because it's my own story, but I found that, like, and I do that. Like I repurpose content for, like if I'm writing for a publication, a lot of times I pull from stuff I've already written and repackage it into something that fits. And I don't think that's wrong. I don't think I'm a hack for doing it. I think because I'm trying to promote value of the story. It doesn't matter what the story is really, other than like it relates to me and I care about it. But it's using it as a tool to tell a story. And if I can use that tool a few times, I'm not going to go buy a hammer every time I need to like knock a nail into a piece of wood. I'm not going to use a different hammer. I'm just going to keep using that hammer till it breaks, basically. So I use the same stories all the time. And a lot of times, because audience comes and goes, right, too. So I think I like to link to stories that I tell, because people might not have read it. Like I get an influx of subscribers every week to my mailing list, and an outflux, if outflux is a word, of people unsubscribing. So and that's why like I link to the stories that I feel that have resonated the most with people a lot, because if people haven't read them, then I kind of like, I want to share this with you too, right? So maybe you read this article, but it links to another idea that I have, and you maybe haven't read that. And so I think it just kind of, it keeps it, because there's so much like ephemeral content and audiences come and go and all of that. I think there's no harm in trying to share things. It's just like when you write an article and you tweet about it, you probably don't tweet about it once, you probably tweet about it a few times. Some people might have missed it. You just want to keep getting it out there to as many people. So I don't really think there's a problem with that. I do that all the time. I worry about it too, but I also do it.
Yeah, I think you made a really good point there when you said that, your audience, your audience is transient. I mean, there are people who stick with you forever, but even those people they have lives of their own. Like, very few people, life, rises in the morning and sets in the afternoon by the content that you create. So
yeah,
I also think that, and at this point, I've been writing for, say, 5 years, so I don't have the breadth of experience that you have, but it's been a pretty intense process for me for 5 years since I found this desire. And I'd say in the last 6 to 12 months, I started to really understand how you can use one story to make many different points. And all it really does is reinforce the importance of all the points that you're trying to make, right? So that one story, you never just learn one thing from an experience. And that experience, if it's powerful, can help you teach a lot of different lessons. And if someone's familiar with the story, then the new lesson you're trying to teach, there's not that learning curve there. So so I think that's a really good point. And so I want to go back to another thing you said about storytelling, and that's the idea of relating it back to yourself. And I see this a lot at presentations. So I love to speak publicly. It's one of my favorite things to do in the entire world. And I see a lot of other speakers speak. And there are times when you can tell that someone is tapped into an experience, right? Even if it wasn't theirs, they really allowed themselves to get into it and feel as if it's theirs. And then there are people who I feel like watched another presentation and are just kind of telling a story that they've heard before. And a lot of that, I think, relates back what you said, how it impacts me and pulling out your own personal emotion. So do you feel like in telling a good story, it is almost a necessity to have to allow yourself to attach to it, to making that personal connection to the story? Or can we tell stories in our work that really just are supporting and almost fluffy?
I think the latter is probably kind of boring for the writer and the reader. So, and I'll relate this because I've been a touring musician for a very long time. It's like we play the same songs every night, but if we're not tapped into those songs, everybody's going to be like sitting there on their iPhones instead of looking at the stage. But if we pull into that initial emotion that was the catalyst for writing the song in the first place, or how that song is currently making us feel, even if we played it 1,000 times, the audience notices that, and the audience can feel that connection and becomes more connected to it themselves. And I mean, I've talked about this in a lot of my writing, is your intentions are evident whether you want them to be or not. And I think a lot of us think that we're really good with our disguises or our online personas or that. And I think it's kind of BS, because I think a lot of times you can kind of see through. It's like what you're saying with the presentations. Like, I can tell if somebody's on stage reading the slides and clicking the button kind of thing versus like a really good TED Talk or something where the person's like almost in tears and talking about something. And you don't need to get that raw with it, but if that's where you go, if that's where your emotions go, and it's like to bring it back to Roy Henry, I've seen him break down and cry telling stories before, and then he's told the same story a few weeks later and been laughing just because it's touching him in different ways, and he's going with it, and he's feeling whatever he needs to feel to tell that story in an honest way for him. He's just kind of it's just happening and it's just flowing, and I think a lot of times it's scary. Like it's kind of scary to get that real with yourself, and it's scary to get that real with yourself in front of people, whether it's on stage or whether it's in writing that's going to live somewhere forever or for as long as the internet exists or something like that. So it's a place of intense vulnerability, but I think that's something that, and it's interesting too, vulnerability is something that we admire in others but fear in ourselves. So we think about leaders like, oh, that person was so, I admire that person so much, right? I like the tenacity of the vulnerability that leader has. But then when I want to do that myself, it's like, oh shit, this is scary. Like, I don't know if I can be that real with the people that I want to talk to. So yeah. It's interesting.
So I love the vulnerability thing. And this is something that I get from a lot of people who have come to the internet, have found that some form of creativity is in them. And I came from the corporate world, right? Like I grew up thinking that the path to success was, I went to a top 30 school, I got a job in one big corporation and went to another big, and constantly unhappy, and I found this writing and help, and my life has changed. I'm a different person today than I was at 26 years old. 27 years old when I first found this, and a lot of that has been a willingness to be vulnerable in this space, because you're gonna make mistakes, right? I mean, no matter how hard you try, you're gonna have, from little grammar gremlins that crawl your site that don't care what you have to say, just where you put your commas, to people who outright just have a distaste for you and your belief system. So. Mm-hmm. How do you deal with those haters, right? Like you mentioned it before, you have people who send you death threats. I actually feel like, so this is how I'll lead you into this question. When I was doing the cover of my book, I used Mars Dorian, who I adore for a lot of different reasons. And there was no question that I was using him because he embodies what I was trying to portray, and he did a fantastic job, and I love the cover that we came out with. But when I sent it to my beta community, this community who gets information first, and they're helping me make decisions, and they've been fantastic. A solid 20% of them hated it. We're like, that's awful, do not use it, like, we see what you're doing, but it's awful. And another 80 were like, this is, we're somewhere between it's good to amazing. Yeah. And I said, 20% hate is what I'm going for in my work, because if you're not pushing if you're not getting hate, right? So okay, you seem to push. You have a style about you. You stick to it. How do you deal with that 20% when they come calling and they're laying their crap on your doorstep? Like, how do you emotionally deal with it? How do you just tactically, move past it?
Yeah, and it's hard because I'm the type of person that I like to push buttons. Well, I like to encourage critical thinking. So if I call people out on something, or if I'm negative about something, it's because I want somebody to think about something. I want somebody to actually think, like, is this something I'm doing? Because I'm the same way. Like, I call myself out on so much stuff that it's like I want to do the same for other people. So a lot of people feel that I'm super critical or I'm super negative, and that's their opinion. So it's interesting though, because we dwell on this negativity. Like what's his name? John Nolan, the guy who invented Ghost, was talking about when he released the Ghost CMS, and he had, I think they funded on Kickstarter by like 6,000. I don't remember how much, but they went so far past what they were trying to fund on Kickstarter that it was just like a ridiculous success. And they built such a good community of people around the release of Ghost. And then he's like, on launch day, I was getting all of these accolades, I was getting all this stuff. And then he said he got one person on Twitter that was like, "Hey John, how do you feel? How do you feel now that you've released Ghost and it's a piece of shit?" And like, what do you think he focused on that day? It's like that one guy out of thousands. And I'm the same. I think everybody's the same. As like I look at reviews of my books, and I might have 100 5-star reviews on a book and 3 1-star reviews. And the 5-star reviews I read, I'm just like, okay, whatever, that's cool that somebody liked it. I move on. I think about it, I appreciate it, I move on. And then I read the 1-star reviews about how somebody wishes they could like come to my house and slap me. And then it's like, I dwell on that for the whole day, and it sucks. But I kind of made a rule with myself, or well, my wife and I made a rule for myself, where if I have a problem with something, or I get a nasty email, or I get like a bad review on Amazon, if I want to gripe about it, then I have the rest of that day to gripe about it. And if I want to get it out, I got to get it all out on that day, because the next day I've got to move on. I've got to find something else to complain about, or I've got to like move past it. So I give myself the time to whine about it or to be angry about it and let it happen, and then I need to move on. I need to get past it, because there's no point. Like, I wouldn't be able to keep writing if I let all of the critics like put me down, kind of thing. Like, I feel that, and Brene Brown, talking about vulnerability, obviously I'll bring up Brene Brown, but she mentioned something about criticism that has stuck with me, and she said that if you're not in the ring with me, if you're not sharing, if you're not creating, if you're not sharing, if you're not making, then your opinion doesn't matter. And so I think a lot of times people are trolls, or they're like the 1-star reviewers on Amazon, and if you look at their profile, that all they do is write 1-star reviews, and that's their life, and that's their small little existence, and if that's what they want to do, fine. But they're not. If somebody else, I find that I put more weight into it if somebody else makes things as well and shares things and is vulnerable in the same way, then I might take it a bit more to heart. But if somebody's just a critic, then I don't care. That's why I don't care about book reviews by critics, or I would never pay to get like my book reviewed by such and such a journal or something, because they don't make stuff. Like, I don't know how they can criticize on it. Like, I don't know why food critics aren't chefs themselves. Otherwise, they aren't allowed to do the job. So I think that a lot of times it's just, I don't care. Like, if you're not making something too, if you're not in the ring with me, then I don't care. Say whatever you want, it's going to fall on deaf ears.
Yeah. You know, there's a really good commercial that I just feel like embodies this mentality with Ricky Gervais, and his niece is sitting in the back seat, and she's got the computer up, and she's reading the tweets, and they're just like, you know, go back to England, you know, go back to Britain, you stink, you're short, all this stuff. And she says, what does this mean? And he said, I'm doing something right. Yeah. Like, because people are, I mean, look, if trolls want to take the time to hate on your work, then that means you're actually making an impact. Like, that is the way that I spun this thing. The very first comment I got on my very first blog post, the very first day, right? So this is, pop this thing up, you're super jacked up, you write a post, you hit publish, you all of a sudden you get this email notification an hour later, someone left a comment, you go back to it, and it's literally like a 4-paragraph hate email about how could I possibly take the time to share this thing into LinkedIn because it's so god awful that I should be ashamed of myself. And like, that took some soul searching to hit publish the second time. Yeah. But you know, I mean, since that day, I kind of was like, geez, like, you know what, the blog's still up. I mean, you know, I'm still right. So we got a couple comments here that I just want to pop up real quick. Writing Biz says sincerity makes a good story. I couldn't agree with that more, Paul. I'm sure you do as well.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's really the crux of a good story. And people can tell that. I mean, when you're talking about someone who's just reading PowerPoint slides, I think, we can tell when people aren't sincere in the stories that they're telling. And then our mutual buddy here, Tommy Walker, says not only that, but as you evolve, the same story can give new insights. You see things from another perspective, you mature, and you understand that there are other players involved. And I think the key word that he used, and the one that really hit me, was maturing. So, so obviously I'm leading you into a new question here. What has changed for you as your work has matured? So from when you first started in this world of creating and putting your work into the public, how has your maturation in that, like, where are you today versus then? What are some of the major things that have changed for you as you've matured in that world?
Yeah. I think that the biggest one is that I'm less afraid to kind of take my audience on a bit of a tangent with ideas and with sharing, as long as I feel that it has value to them. I don't mind. Like when I first started writing, I was writing specifically for people who have an online business that aren't web designers, because it's like web designers only write for other web designers. I'm going to be a web designer writing for people that hire web designers. It just seems smarter to me. So I was only writing about web design as it related to people hiring web designers, which I think was a good idea, and at the time it was a good idea, and I wrote a couple books that sold well on that. But then I started feeling like, and a lot of creatives kind of get to this place where they feel like they've said what they needed to say about that topic, and I feel like I've said, like, obviously I still get ideas and I still share like pieces about web design. Like I wrote an article about using emotion and empathy in web design a few weeks ago, and I hadn't written about web design for probably a year. But the point that I'm trying to make back to it is that I now don't mind taking my audience on a bit of a journey with me. So I like coming up, what are we? We're in June right now. I don't remember what the date is. I don't even have it on my computer. So it's the 26th. So starting this Sunday with my mailing list, I'm sharing 4 articles that have nothing to do with business really. Like I'm talking about, I think I got a post on anger, I got a post on bullying, I've got a post on, what are some of the other ones? Quitting and something else. And it's just, I felt like I needed a month where I've been writing about marketing and content and all of that for the last like 6 months. It's like, I need a break, and I feel like my audience would appreciate a break. I feel like they wouldn't mind reading. Like most of the people that are on my newsletter list tell me that, like, they sign up for lots of newsletters but don't read them, but they say that they read mine. So I feel like, okay, if you're reading my newsletter, I've got to give you something that's worth reading the next time and the next time. So I don't mind taking people on a bit of a journey. Like sometimes I talk about philosophy or sometimes I talk about anger coming up. So I think now compared to back then, like if 4 or 5 years ago I said like, okay, Paul, do you think you should write about fear today? I'd be like, no, that's not going to happen. I write about web design again. I write about colors. So I feel like now I can get a bit more, and it's not even personal. Like I guess it is slightly personal, but it's still, I think there's a way to be personal that provides value. Like I think a lot of people write for themselves and themselves alone, and that I have absolutely no problem with it. But if you're also trying to build an audience, they kind of have to factor into the picture a little bit as well. So I'm writing personal stories and I'm sharing my own insights and that, but I'm also always cognizant of, okay, how does this relate to my audience? What can they get from it as the main message? And what is it in what I'm writing that they can come away with that provides value or insight or some benefit to their lives, as opposed to just me writing and sharing and me writing and sharing. I don't think I would have an audience if I just kept doing that.
Yeah. So we're 40 minutes into this thing, and I have 3 topics that I want to hit on.
Sure.
Well, we'll go briefly because this has been very good, and I love when the way that these conversations start to meander. It's why I really enjoy this format. The first is, and this is it's gonna sound technical, but it's not. It completely relates to what we're talking about. But it does have to do with web design. And one of the things that I really admired about your web design work is your ability, specifically with personal brands. you seem to have a knack for capturing the personality or the essence of who that person is, like with Marie Forleo or your work with Danielle Laporte. Like, when you go to that site, it feels on brand, on target to who that person is, the type of person that they are. I'm sure a lot of that is conversation with them and getting to know them, but just from the creative side, from your own personal, like, how do you look into that person and figure out how to put this website around them that matches their brand? Like, what are you looking for in them? Because I think that in all our work, whether it's creative or not, this type of thing can help us be better at what we do. So how do you you do a good job of this, so how do you do it?
Thank you. Well, I think the main thing is that I focus on, like, the type of clients that I work with are all kind of, they're not in the same industry, but they exist in kind of the same sphere, and they have kind of the same way that they want to put themselves out there, which is an authentic and personal way that provides value, which are the type of people that I like. So I'm lucky that I'm in a place in my career, like, I only work with people that I want to work with. So it becomes easier for me to kind of pull that brand out of them to make a visual story for their website. Excuse me. And so, yeah, I just really, I like to work with the type of people that I like to work with. And those are the type of people that are okay with me doing that. Like, a lot of times, if I pitch some of the ideas that I pitch to some of my clients to, like, a bank or an insurance company, they would be like, we love this, we are never, ever, ever going to do this. And I feel like the reason why I like these type of clients is because they're okay to go out on a limb with me, and they're okay to examine what the business goals are first and foremost, and then figure out how we can use their personality to accomplish that, and to use their own values to accomplish that. And I think a lot of it comes down to that. Like, I don't care what best practices are, or like 15 tips for converting optimally and all that. Like, it's, those kind of things can be important and that, but I think there's a way to use the science to make the art, and is taking the science and the knowledge of how things work and then applying that to how you want to do business, how you want your business to run. And it's not a matter of, and I see this so much on the web, it's just like there's a trend, so then everybody's just on trend. Or a leader of an industry comes out with a website that looks a certain way, everybody wants a copy of it. Even me, like, I get, at least not so much anymore, but when I first started doing, like, every time I would redesign Danielle Laporte's website, I would get probably 100 emails over the next couple of weeks, like, I love the site for Danielle, I want a site exactly like that. And I'd just be like, no, I'm not interested. That works for her because she's her. It wouldn't work for you unless you're her, unless your business model is like single white female, copy every single thing, which is kind of creepy, and I wouldn't want to work with that person.
And doesn't it kind of defeat the purpose too? Like,
yeah,
having an exact match of someone else, from the jump, you are never going to be what they are, or even close, because you're trying to copy exactly what they do. Like, it makes no sense to me.
Yeah, exactly. So I think focusing on the individual and what works for the individual and the brand, and taking the business goals and filtering it through that lens all the time for every single thing is what results in the sites that I have in my portfolio, the sites that people might know if they live in that industry. So
yeah. Very cool. Very, very, I love that. And I just want a couple people have asked about how to sign up for your newsletter. I just posted a link into the event comment stream that will take you right to the page where you can sign up for Paul's newsletter, and I'll have them in the show notes as well. So anyone listening to the podcast episode of this later on, ryanhanley.com/show88, and that'll take you right there, or just go to pjrvs.com and you'll see right on the top that Paul's got a link to his newsletter there. So second topic I want to talk about before we close up shop here, your site, very simplistic, right? Very minimalistic. I know not all your work is minimal, simplicity, because I'm assuming some clients just don't want that, which obviously everyone has their own taste. But you choose this minimalistic design. Your newsletter is minimalistic design. What is it about that you're drawn to?
Focus. Straight straight and simple is focus. So my website is plain because the only thing I really want people to do is sign up for my mailing list. If they want to buy my books, they're going to see the books listed or mentioned in the newsletter. I would rather be talking to people on my newsletter and sharing articles that I write for free with them to give them a taste. Like I would rather you read a bit of my stuff before you buy my book than just buy the book, and if you don't like it, then you just wasted that money. Obviously, it's not that much money. It's like a cup of coffee, but still, like I would rather you kind of be interested. And I feel like my mailing list is where I like to connect with people anyways. Like I said earlier, like I get hundreds of replies every Sunday. And I like that. That's why I don't have comments on my website, because I couldn't care less about comments. Like anybody can just comment and I might miss it, or other people. Yeah, so I'd rather just have a one-on-one dialogue with people, and that's why people reply to my newsletters. People reply to my welcome email too, which I like, because I'm like, if you're going to be listening to me, like, introduce yourself, say hello. If you sign up for my newsletter today, reply to the welcome message and say hello, introduce yourself, let me know who you are.
That's see, it's funny. I am always debating this, right? I'm actually in the process of redesigning my site, and I actually was just talking with the person who's doing it. Actually, he was on Monday about single column blog posts, removing the sidebar, stuff like that, because I am the same. Like, I want people to focus on the content, right? Like, if you want to do business with me, it's very obvious the things that I do and help people with. Like I keep coming back to this idea that, like, I don't need you to be looking to the right of my content to understand who I am and the message I'm trying to get across. Like, if you want to connect with me in social space, like, it's not hard to find me. Like, I don't need it filled up with social icons and links to all these different things. And there's like that part of me that wants to go that way and be that person, and I'm actually leaning in that direction pretty hard. But then there's like this other side of me, right? Like this conformist, the way everything's done, like, just like devil sitting on this shoulder, like, no, you need to have a sidebar and you have to have, and all this other crap. And it's just, I completely agree with you. Focus is the most important thing about a site. Like, why are you drawing people to your site? Unless you're a major advertiser, you can be Forbes, and then you can't even read the content on Forbes half the time because they have so many things that they've stuffed into the page that it's almost. I tried to read an article today on Forbes that I was interested in, and it was annoying, and I probably won't go back for a while. So the very last thing I want to talk about, I want you to talk a little bit about your most recent book, The Good Creative. Tell us, what does it mean to be a good creative? I know that you have these 18 points that make a good creative. You don't have to run through all 18, obviously, but just,
That's
give
good,
us the
because I don't remember them all off the top of my head.
I can't imagine. From writing, it's funny, because I'm in this process of, my book is like 90% done, and my editor will ask me questions about the book, and I'll be like, I don't even 100% remember what you're talking about. Like, I gotta go back and look. So yeah, just give us the theme. Like, where did it come from? What was the genesis of it? Was it an article? Was it a newsletter? Was it a comment? Was it a piece of music you heard or wrote? Just give us the rundown on this book.
Sure. So looping back to the very first thing that we were talking about was my writing process. So in my scratch pad of ideas, I realized after I had written most of these habits, like just what the habit was for being a good creative. I wasn't even thinking about it in terms of, okay, this is going to be a book, so these are the chapters. I was writing down ideas that I was having or things that I wanted to write about. And then when I looked back at that list, I was like, these 18 things relate to each other. And it probably took me a couple months to come up with this list, but I wasn't even aware that I was making a list to use for a book. I was just making a list of things that I wanted to write about. And I find that with a lot of my book writing is if I write a bunch of content and then I look back at it after it's written or after I've written down all the ideas, I can then say, like, okay, these ones go all with this, and this could be a book or this could be an article. So when I started The Good Creative, I was thinking about, I guess, things that because the book before that was Everything I Know, which is super egotistical of a title.
It's amazing. I love it.
Yeah. So I wanted to write something that was me looking at how other creatives do their thing and do their thing well. And so I started looking at this list, and I'm like, these are all habits that other creatives use to do well in what their work is. And I was like, this could be a book. Well, first of all, I thought this could be a really long article that I write, and I don't care how long my articles are. Sometimes they're 2,000-3,000 words, and I started writing it, and it hit 10,000 words. I'm like, yeah, maybe, and I still have to keep going. Maybe this should be a book. So I figured that I wanted to share something that had the type of information that I like to write about anyways, but I also wanted to have examples because I read so many like business and marketing books. They all use the same examples. I'm so sick of reading about Steve Jobs and Richard Branson and all of that. And I'm like, I gotta find examples of crazy creatives who are good at what they do, but that people might not have heard of. And obviously, like, there's a quote from Tim Ferriss. So I mean, I do that in my writing too. It's easy to lean on people that we all know. But I wanted the majority of the examples of creatives in my book to be people that you might not know. Like I talked about, her name's Evelyn something. She's the costume designer for The Walking Dead, which is one of my favorite shows. Yeah. And I read a few articles about her, and I was like, I started and then I watched a few more episodes of The Walking Dead. I'm like, the costume design in this show is so good. And if you look at the groups of people in the show, like the main group of people, they don't dress the same, but they all have kind of a similar look. And then if you look at the governor and his group of people in that town, they all kind of dressed a similar way. And I'm like, there's so much going on subconsciously that's just making this show as good as it is. I'm like, I have to talk about this woman. She's so smart. So it was things like that where it's just like I need to share as many different kinds of creatives for one, and as many different stories that show people doing things their way. Like I talk about one guy in the book who's a toothpick artist who makes statues with like 50,000 toothpicks. Like that guy is awesome. That guy's doing, and he has a degree in like architecture or fine art or something like that, but he's a toothpick guy. I'm like, this guy is awesome. This guy could be doing something that's maybe making more money or more conformist, but he's doing his thing. Like he's living the dream. He's been on like the Today Show and all sorts of other like mainstream shows. It's because he's doing his thing. It's because his intentions are shining through, and he's sharing with people what he wants to share with people, and he's not afraid of his own unique voice and his own unique vision and the art that he wants to share. So yeah, that's kind of
really cool, because when you think about it, like if he's a junior designer at architecture firm, like putting another strip mall up in Middle America,
yeah,
he's just he's just another guy. But if he uses architecture to build toothpick structures, he makes it to the Today Show. So life is funny, we can say that, or at least life has a very good sense of humor. Paul, this has been amazing conversation, dude. Cool. I took a ton of notes on what you're saying, and I just love the flow. Like it's a great flow. You got a great flow, dude. So appreciate your time. I have links for everyone watching. I have links to Paul's newsletter and I just put another one in there, to The Good Creative. And as Denver just said, The Good Creative on Amazon only has 8 reviews. So the Content Warfare Nation is going to activate and buy your book and get you some more reviews there. Is there any place else besides your site that you would like people to catch up with you? Any social profile, anything else like that, or is just the site and the newsletter the best place to get at you?
Yeah, if you have any questions, hit me up on Twitter, PJRBS, same as my website, it's PJRBS, and I'm on Twitter a few times a day, and I try to answer every question that people send me, and I like to talk to people on Twitter. So
awesome. Dude, thanks for coming. Great conversation. Thanks to everyone for being here. We're going to get out.